The call came in on a Tuesday, a seemingly ordinary day, with the sun shining and children playing in the streets. But that normalcy was shattered by the chilling report, a foul odor, so strong it made the neighbors gag. Emanating from a quiet suburban home nestled in a seemingly peaceful neighborhood, the stench of death hung heavy in the air, a grim harbinger of the horrors within. Police arrived, their faces grim and their hearts heavy with dread. They had seen this before, but each time it was a fresh wound on their souls. But nothing could prepare them for the horror that awaited inside. The scene was beyond their worst nightmares. The front door creaked open, revealing a scene of unimaginable depravity. The hallway was dark, the air thick with an oppressive silence. The air inside was thick with the smell of decay. It was overpowering, nauseating. The walls seemed to close in with the weight of the horror. Two small bodies lay on the living room floor, covered hastily with sheets. Their tiny frames were lifeless still. Innocence lost in the most brutal way. The officers exchanged glances, their eyes filled with a mixture of horror and determination. They knew they had to act swiftly. This was no ordinary crime scene. This was pure evil, a manifestation of humanity's darkest side. The house was eerily silent, as if holding its breath in the wake of the atrocity. The only sound was the frantic scribbling of pens as officers documented the gruesome scene. Every detail was crucial, every note a step towards justice, every piece of evidence a potential clue, each marker a beacon of hope in the darkness. The victims appeared to be young children, their identities, still unknown, added to the tragedy. But one thing was clear: they had met a horrific end. The investigation began immediately, with a sense of urgency and purpose. Detectives swarmed the house, their every move calculated and precise. They knew time was of the essence. They dusted for fingerprints, collected evidence, and interviewed neighbors. The clock was ticking, and every second counted. And they were determined to bring the perpetrator to justice. Their resolve was unshakable. No matter how long it took, no matter the obstacles they faced, no matter how difficult the path, they would not rest until justice was served and the innocent were avenged. As the investigation unfolded, the pieces of a grim puzzle began to fall into place. A horrifying truth began to emerge, one that would shake the community to its core. The prime suspect was not a stranger, not an intruder who had broken into the sanctity of a home, but the children's own mother, 32-year-old Susan Smith, a woman who had once been seen as a loving parent. Neighbors described her as quiet, reserved, almost invisible in the fabric of the community. But behind her unassuming facade, a darker truth lurked, hidden from the world. Detectives discovered a history of mental instability, a past riddled with psychological turmoil, a past shrouded in secrecy and despair, filled with haunting entries in her personal diary. Susan had been battling depression for years. Her marriage had crumbled under the weight of her struggles, and she was drowning in a sea of despair, feeling isolated and hopeless. The children, it seemed, had become an unbearable burden, a constant reminder of her failing life, a weight she could no longer bear, a responsibility that felt like a crushing load. Interviews with family and friends painted a disturbing picture of a woman on the edge. Susan had confessed to feeling overwhelmed, to friends and family who now regret not seeing the signs. She had spoken of ending her own life, leaving behind cryptic notes and alarming messages. But no one could have imagined she would harm her children. The thought was unthinkable, unfathomable, a nightmare beyond comprehension. The evidence against Susan was mounting, each piece more damning than the last. Fingerprints found at the scene matched hers, leaving little room for doubt. Her alibi crumbled under scrutiny. falling apart with each probing question, and her demeanor during questioning raised red flags. She was detached, emotionless, as if disconnected from reality, as if the gravity of the situation had yet to sink in, leaving everyone to wonder what had truly happened behind closed doors. The news of Susan's arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Fathers shook their heads in disbelief. How could a mother commit such an unspeakable act? The question hung heavy in the air, unanswered, unanswerable. During interrogation, Susan remained evasive. She denied any involvement in the murders. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion, but the detectives were relentless. They pressed for answers, refusing to be swayed by her facade of innocence. The pressure mounted. The weight of the evidence became too much to bear. Finally, Susan broke. She confessed to the unthinkable. She admitted to drugging her children, driving them to a secluded lake, and drowning them in the cold, dark water. Her words were cold, calculated, devoid of remorse. The confession sent chills down the spines of even the most seasoned detectives. It was a chilling reminder of the darkness that can reside in the human heart. A stark reminder that monsters don't always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes they walk among us, hidden in plain sight. Section 4. Whispers and outrage. The community reacts. The news of Susan's confession spread like wildfire. The community, once a peaceful haven, was now a cauldron of anger, grief, and disbelief. Neighbors gathered on street corners, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and horror. How could this happen in their town? In their midst? Social media exploded with outrage and condemnation. #Justice for the Innocents became a rallying cry. The case dominated headlines, news cycles, and dinner table conversations. The nation watched in horror as the details of the crime unfolded, the brutality, the senselessness. It was almost too much to bear. Candlelight vigils were held in honor of the victims. Strangers wept for the young lives cut tragically short, for the innocents lost, for the future denied. The community, once fractured by the heinous act, now found unity in their shared grief and outrage. They would not let this tragedy define them. They would find strength in their pain, and they would demand justice for the innocent. Section 5. Justice for the Innocent. The legal battle begins. The trial of Susan Smith was one of the most highly publicized in history. The courtroom was packed with reporters, spectators, and family members seeking justice for the victims. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence against Susan: DNA, fingerprints, and her own chilling confession. The defense argued that Susan was not of sound mind at the time of the murders, that she was a victim herself, a victim of her own demons. But the jury was unconvinced. The evidence was too overwhelming, the crime too heinous. After days of deliberation, they reached a verdict: guilty. The courtroom erupted in gasps and sobs. Justice, it seemed, had been served, but the scars of the crime ran deep. The community was forever changed. Susan Smith was sentenced to life in prison, her fate sealed by her own hand, her legacy forever tarnished by the unspeakable acts she had committed. Section 6. Inside the Mind of a Monster. Experts weigh in. In the aftermath of the trial, criminal psychologists and forensic experts grappled with the question that haunted everyone's minds. Why? Why would someone commit such an unthinkable act? What could drive a mother to kill her own children? This question lingered in the air, heavy and oppressive. Some pointed to Susan's history of mental illness, her battle with depression. They argued that her mental state played a significant role in her actions. Others argued that it was a cold, calculated act of selfishness. They believed she was fully aware of her actions and their consequences, a desperate attempt to escape a life she no longer wanted. The debate raged on, with no clear consensus in sight. But one thing was clear: there were no easy answers, no simple explanations. The complexity of the human mind defies easy categorization. The human mind is a complex and often terrifying labyrinth. It holds secrets and dark impulses that even the person themselves may not fully understand. And sometimes, the darkest impulses lurk within its deepest recesses, hidden away, waiting for the right moment to surface. The ticking clock symbolizes the inevitable emergence of these dark thoughts. The case of Susan Smith served as a chilling reminder that evil can take many forms. It can be subtle, insidious, and often it wears a familiar face. And that even those closest to us can be capable of unimaginable cruelty. The facade of normalcy can hide the most sinister intentions. It forced us to confront the uncomfortable truth that monsters don't always fit a profile. They can be anyone, anywhere. They don't always look like monsters. They can blend in seamlessly, hiding in plain sight. Sometimes they look like us. They are us. This realization is perhaps the most terrifying of all. Section 7. Scars that time won't heal. The enduring impact. Years have passed since the tragic events that shook the community, but the memory of the 2 innocent lives lost continues to cast a long shadow. The house where the crime occurred stood empty for years, a constant reminder of the horror that had transpired within its walls. The community has slowly begun to heal, but the scars of that fateful day remain. The case of Susan Smith became a catalyst for change. It sparked conversations about mental health awareness, child protection, and the importance of early intervention. It served as a stark reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, and that we must remain vigilant in our efforts to protect the most vulnerable among us. The legacy of this tragedy is a painful one, but it is also a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, there is always hope. Hope for a brighter future. Hope for a world where such horrors are never repeated.